Okay, so we'll give folks a few minutes to join in. So you're our second experiment. We had one other remote presentation. So we're testing the system out to see how it will work and if it's an effective technique to tie everybody together that are spread all over the world.
Did the person work?
Yeah, I think it was okay. We're able to get many more individuals to participate with this kind of remote web-based meeting than trying to get everyone in the same room. So maybe 5 after we'll go through and do introductions for those on in the room here and on the WebEx, and then we'll start rolling.
Okay, all right.
Give people a few more minutes to chime in. I know we had we've got some rain out here, so people were delayed. Yeah. It's frightful. We just got used to the drought.
So when I moved out here, people told me when it's rain, they go outside and watch the rain. I think you
join the conference.
I'm sure the true thing.
You guys know if Dawn or Howard are gonna? Okay. No, probably because she was gonna be late. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, an interview with somebody for minutes on campus.
Hello. Hello.
Has joined the conference.
Hi, Tony. How are you?
Has joined the conference.
Robert Sugar, long-term employee.
I have heard part of the recording.
Okay, we've got a number of folks kind of joining in here, so we're going to give it another minute or two, and then we'll go around and do introductions. But give folks another minute or two to get logged in and dialed in.
Hi, this is Jennifer. Checking if the meeting password actually Berkeley or hot?
Pause.
H-A-A-S.
Thank you.
I think Paul is trying to find those CDAs compared to
F and F.
I'll just go to the library. On campus, he's interviewing somebody for a nose position. but it just occurred to me. I think I explained it to him once.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I explained it to him. I'm taking a stroll.
Yeah, one's Rick and I think one is somebody else, or it's not associated. Okay, why don't we go ahead and do your introduction. We'll start off here in the room. I'm Maroon with CCRM. This is Henry Hro, and also with CCRM. I'm the truck CCRM. Joining here, CCRM. Hi, Fire Dog. There's and Paul Schulman. All right, so let's try to focus on the WebEx. Maybe if you guys can pull up your participant list, we'll start to talk and kind of work our way down. If you can introduce yourself, maybe organization and area of specialty.
Christopher Lyson. I'm a public health instructor currently in Boston University School of Public Health, working as a Ph.D. and complaint in Boston. I have a background in science and technology, and I'm just better about that.
There you go, Paul. How about Audi? Now, Chuck, why don't you go next? Chuck McGee.
Is that an echo or a faint response? You know?
No. How about, let's try Dan. Dan, Kevin. No. Kofi, are you on there?
I am.
Okay. Do I do a little intro?
Sure. My name is Kofi Ntavi. I am with CCRM and Exponent. My background is civil engineering, professional management. What I'm doing and I'm interested in is evaluating risk and reliability of large-scale engineered systems. And so my work right now is in the utility sector, both gas and electric.
Great, thank you. Patty. Hey, Patty, are you with us? Looks like we're having some sort of a audio issue with the people who are computer connecting for whatever reason. Bob Schroeder, are you with us?
Hi, Schroeder here, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Yay!
Good. All right, success. Ron Schroeder, I'm a fire scientist that my practice is going in and doing autopsies on buildings, airplanes, ships, industrial processes after catastrophes that happen. Obviously, CCRM is a tool to help us better learn and teach others so we don't repeat these mistakes, which we seem to be doing.
How about Thomas?
Yeah, this is Tom Topol. I'm with Causal Factors Analysis in Chicago, and my area is aviation safety.
Thank you. Tom Anderson.
Yes, I'm here. Good afternoon, everyone. Good morning from the UK. I am Tom Anderson. I'm an engineer and psychologist. I'm a part-time mature student studying a Ph.D. at Manhattan University. And for my day job, I work in the UK nuclear industry, helping them to build cultures of reliability and resilience.
Great, thanks. So maybe we'll cycle back to this at the end of the meeting. Rick, I want to pass the ball over to you. Do you want to give the group a quick background on you, and then we can head into your presentation?
Great. Yeah, I'm Rick Hartley. I work at a facility called Pantex in Amarillo, Texas. It's a nuclear weapons
disassembly plant. And so the OUS nuclear stock process every year. And we have been kind of embarking on this ironically aspect of trying to improve performance for quite a while. It's probably one. And so we have been doing this for quite a while. And I guess I call formalizing the Hro aspect of the last 7 years. Do we launch or what?
Go ahead.
Oh, okay.
Away we go.
Let me provide a little bit of a background here as far as what we are. 3,000 people work here. Like I said before, weapons assembly. We also collect what we call surveillance data for the nuclear laboratories for them to certify stockpile and still in stockpile. We also manufacture isotopes, probably some of the most powerful explosives in the world. We have some big manufacturing facility here. We also handle special some of uranium, sealed components, so to speak. And so we do a lot of hazards. We have been trying for quite a while to bring new processes on board to help people understand the risk, also to streamline the limits of work. We're not very mechanicalized here. We're very much a facility. We have specialized buildings and stuff like that, but it's not what you consider your state-of-the-art nuclear plant. We're a World War II finished facility that have modified to do the work that we do. So a lot of our facilities, a lot of the infrastructure we have here is pretty old and pretty small in today's standards, so to speak. So let me kind of share with you how this whole process started at Pantex. We've been doing the nuclear weapons business here since after World War II. The processes before that time or during that time frame there were very much expert-based. And so in the 1990 time frame, with the nuclear Navy influence, the NRC influence, they wanted to try to formalize how we conducted work with the idea in mind. They could control the work, they could get a better sense of what the risk associated with that was. So they brought a program which we call the Causal Factors program, a very, very big push that was pushed throughout DOE into organizations like ours. And the way we're kind of set up, if it's not a priority with the Department of Energy, we don't have time to do it. So it was a very big push to formalize operations. A lot of the Navy people here, new Navy people here, with the idea in mind that they would help us become more formalized, more proceduralized in our processes. Then the Department of Energy embarked on a DOE-wide effort to try to formalize all safety management. So they brought in a process called safety management. And so that was required to be done DOE-wide. That included not only nuclear processes, but every process that was done by any DOE facility had to go through this integrated safety management process, which is a fairly simple process, but now I'm starting to appreciate how good it really is compared to a lot of the commercial industry happens to have. And that was kind of standardized throughout all of DOE. And then in the mid-95 time frame, we realized that if you're trying to totally mitigate the instigators of problems, so a big effort went on board to try to minimize any amount of energy put into our work, mechanical or electrical or thermal energy. So they had a program called Safety 2001, I'm sorry, Safety 21. And so, by the second we did this, we went back and rewrote every process we had to minimize the amount of lifting, amount of tooling that was used. Everything was designed to minimize the energy that could possibly be input into a weapon to improve the safety features thereof. Okay. And then also, in parallel to that, the DOE embarked upon the same process that the Regulatory Commission did, what they call document safety analysis. This is a formalized risk assessment process. It goes through a very detailed calculations as far as the work that was done, the energy that was a part of every separate process, and based on that, put controls in place to make sure that nothing above 10 to minus 12 risk factors was ever considered in any operation. So we ended up putting a lot of controls in place to minimize any kind of risk whatsoever. And again, the deal was the cumulative risk will be 10 minus 12 for any operation we do at Pantex. And then based on that, the DOE identified us, basically they were the insurance agents to identify the amount of work that we did, as long as we documented safety analysis and they presented, we could continue operations. And so then the contract, and that was the same contract we got aboard since 1940. After 40 years or so, the contract was redid in 2001, and D&W Pantex came on board. And they brought on board what they call the human improvement process. That was a kind of a side shoot from the nuclear commercial industry. Human error is inevitable. How can you minimize it by recognizing the setup factors? How can you put variables in place to control it? They have come on board. Again, when we do these efforts here, we're trying to teach and train 3,000, 3,500 people. This process is just like this process was quite a big investment as far as training is concerned. And then in 2007 time frame, I guess the plant manager at the time was one of Hartley's first meetings on high reliability. Thought that would be a good vehicle for us to try to use it. So we embarked in the 2007 time frame and doing it ever since. And now we have a new contractor change, and who knows where we'll be going in the future. So that's kind of a timeline of our HRO efforts here at Pantex. 7 years, and it's from a HRO perspective, but I would say since the early 90s, a version of reliability, the high reliability has been in place and enforced pretty strongly here at Pantex. So everybody here understands and appreciates that and is willing to go through the extraordinary effort required to sell and all that kind of stuff. That's kind of where we came from on our HRO process. And so when we worked on the one I'm going to show you in a few seconds, it was built on a long heritage, a lot of work. And so we probably couldn't have taken our program when we did if we didn't have that kind of background to build upon. So when we started our process in 2007, our heritage, applying in, when we got started, but it helped quite a bit. So with that being said, does anybody have any questions before I go to kind of frame out what the process looks like for us?
Yes, Rick. Tarun and Rick, are your slides going to be available in our library after the presentation? I hope you're early enough to hear.
Well, they can be. I sent them to Tarun, so I just said we can review that.
Great, thank you, sir. Yeah, we have it. For those of you on the WebEx who are not talking, if you can put your mics on mute, that would be helpful. We're getting a little bit of feedback from people. Okay, Rich, it's your show.
Okay, so let me kind of walk you through started our process off. And so, again, high hazard work we do here, as you probably would guess, we cannot afford any incident, a nuclear or explosive incident. We, by the way, had one in early 95 time frame or earlier than that, still 3 people. can't afford it to happen. So this program here was developed to try to get people to buy into it. So let me kind of start with slide number 1 here. And so we read all the literature that you guys worked so hard to produce on a theory of high reliability. The first introduction would be to teach this stuff in your work to our senior mechanical staff. The one thing that we started to recognize pretty early in the game was that there's lots of good information out there of what an organization would look like if it were high reliability. We didn't see a whole lot on a recipe of how to make it or get to this. So our struggle was, how do you take 3,500 people or so who, some of them are just manual workers, and then bring them to this journey here to help them understand what it is we want them to do. So we had what we call the in-state definition, the way we kind of characterize it. If it were highly reliable, we would look like that. Our struggle was with some definition together to help people understand what our process was like. So we did want to take a systems approach, and I would say that everything here at Pantex is a systems approach. Some systems aren't very well documented, aren't very formal, but everybody here has a way of doing their work. So that was the first aspect we wanted to focus on. The other 2 key points, and it kind of came from some of Cindy Decker's work, we have a feeling that we can plan our work such that it will be safe, and by safe I mean within the documented safety analysis of the risk assessment of stuff to make sure we stay well within the limits of accepted risk that DOE has agreed to. So this work as planned framework that we talked about tries to proceduralize our work. Some of the procedures are very, very detailed, and some of the more critical procedures that deal with different work are reader work or checker. The reader reads you one step, the work another step. Something else verifies the fact that the person did it step and document line by line. I adhere to this particular process because we just can't afford for somebody to try to add them a different process. Okay.
Hey, Rick, can you make your slides full page?
They were,
What's in the slide sorter? Can you do like slideshow or something?
Okay, I think I'm in.
There, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I was on this one. Okay. So anyway, the aspect of it was we started to see a lot of value in just because you plan work. Don't ever kid yourself. These last follow the procedure, not the details you like to do, but the work is done. It became a pretty powerful tool to go down that systematic and in doing so, you'll see what the variation is. And I kid you not, it's so unlikely to what smart people will realize that even though the engineers go to the procedure, people take the liberty of reading it and understanding it and doing it. And that gap between how you plan work and how you do work, in some cases, cannot be tolerated. And so that's what we struggle with this program here, to identify it and then drive it down to whatever level we accept. That became kind of our process definition for our Hro program. Okay? So that being said, because we want to take a systems approach, and again, we're not a research facility, we're a production plant, and so we wouldn't do any work, very profound knowledge here. If you take a systems approach, there's 4 tenets to kind of keep in mind. Understand what the systems are, have knowledge of systems, understand the variation thereof, acknowledge the psychology of people to buy into operating those systems, and have knowledge, learn what doesn't work in your systems, and do feedback and learning activities based on that. So based on the 4 tenets of Deming, we developed 4 practices for our Hro program. You can see on the right-hand side. And we kept it pretty small, pretty simple. And we also just want to hear into the war with some point existing programs. We don't want to come in with a completion program, and terminology here is Mike and I built upon that and helped them kind of understand maybe a little bit more of the why behind the why. So we have these 4 practices, which I'll kind of describe to you briefly. Here's the 4 practices, which are basically just kind of titles, but you see the words in the white bullet there. Those are the actions we want the people to start looking forward to and actually doing to make this process work. So, practice number 1, which I'll show you here in a second, that's kind of leadership's box. If they don't buy this process, it's kind of a rival. We wanted people to actually take the system, make it simple, and box number 2, or practice number 2, we have this what we call great change framework, which I'll share with you here in a second. But, you know, we had no doubt people at Pantex knew how to do work. We weren't convinced that people explicitly knew where the hazards were in their operations to make sure that you could put some controls or barriers in place to make sure it worked smoothly for them. And then practice number 3, of course, when people get feedback, if a process doesn't work, please tell us why. And then tier number 4, practice number 4 here. Again, building on what we already had. There's different levels of learning and based on how sensitive the operation is, the level of learning will go exponentially. So let me walk you through each of the 4 practices to kind of show you what we had in mind, okay? And the other thing, by the way, we have a thing called focus on physics. In a bureaucracy here, people got the feeling that, you know, because we have so many things to get done, so few resources, that if management dictated something to be done, it would be done. And so we try to stress to people to focus on the physics of either explosives, of nuclear explosives. Never lose sight of the physics, because as soon as you lose sight of the physics, that's when you'll have this very eventful event. And so we wanted to go back and tell people that you didn't care how much their management beat up or down on the chest. Always go back and make sure you got the process correct before you embark on that, because that's going to be the true test. So, practice number 1, like I call it, works leadership's role. You know, man is a system, not the parts. So, we are very much hierarchical oriented. We have divisions. And so, the reason we said man is a system, not the part, is it's very simple, very easy for government agencies to manage their people, so to speak, donor teams and stuff like that. But the bottom line is, work is done by cutting costs to various divisions, and we want to emphasize that practice number 1. So, the simple thing here is, if you don't have your systems defined, you can't talk about it. So, the bottom line is, we have a big effort. We started a big effort to very explicitly define what these systems were. And you'll see later on, this ends up being a pretty simple process mapping, but it's very insightful. People actually see what the process looks like. So this whole thing here is to make the system visible. If they're visible, they can be managed. They can be, you know, troubleshooted and stuff like that. Without that, you're going to figure out how hot to whoever has that process in the model. So here in the cartoon, we use to kind of briefly show people what we mean by, you know, define what the system looks like. It's nothing but either process map at the system level, or maybe systems map at a higher level. The bottom line is, I am what the plant mission is that there is product. Each product line has a process. Each process has steps. Each set of inputs and outputs. That sounds pretty trivial, but we have as many processes we have here. We have a lot of interdependencies on various groups that aren't explicitly noted, and so you simply expect the right thing to show at the right time for the right quality factors without it being written down. So we realized that we really were dependent on each other in a very implied way. And this effort here was to make people aware of that, try to make it more explicit. Because again, if you can see these relationships, you can start to answer them. Then the idea was to do this across the plant, and it's got to be a phenomenal trust challenge to do this mapping process. But one thing we realized is a very powerful process detailed process. You have the data layer, the process, we have, and you can barely ever come home. So this was kind of a way to start this process up. The next step was to go through there, and some of the steps that we have are very, very hazardous. And so the idea was, after you understand the process is step by step, you go through each step, you have to have something associated with step 1 and 3 here, that could ruin your day in a very, very bad way. Make sure you have control of the way at that step to make sure you can prevent that from occurring. And then the other thing was, because we have so much stuff going on here, we thought it's very important to tell people that you may have millions of things to get done every day, lots of constraints, lots of requirements, but this one quote here from Covey book, keep the most important thing, and that's very, very important, because what we found out that if leadership doesn't tell me what's important, if they got to deliver at 4:30, deal with 5 of themselves, I cannot tell you how many times we have been totally shocked that the whole future fate of the plant was in the hands of one worker and just his or her good behavior, and no other control except for that. And when the plant has a bad day, the company would have a bad day, the country would have a bad day. What that is, when they see a bad day. Okay. So again, we want to make sure that people, the leadership told people what was really important. So we came up with this kind of terminology of a critical risk plan code. And this came about because when we talked to the senior managers, one question I'd always ask them, if I had a room with 20, 25 senior managers, I asked them, what's the most hazardous or consequential event we have in Pantex? And if I had 20 people, typically I have about 30 answers to that. And I go, there's a problem, because if you guys at the senior management level don't understand what those terrible events are and tell your people what they are, they're going to be very busy, working very hard, and won't be focused on important stuff. We made every senior management plan goes through their division and produce a list. What are those events at your division level that we cannot afford to have happen at this plant? We collected that list, and by the way, that was no small feat. That was the most hardest thing in the world to do. You had to sit down there and define what was really, really important to them, what were the major consequences that could go wrong, and we published that list. The idea was to make the list available to everybody, so that everybody in the plant knew what these big bad actors happened to do. Okay? And then a plant goes in for something smaller than that. People had some things that would really be damaging to the company, not necessarily for the plant. So we give an moderate category here of other things to consider. But anyway, we wanted to have this list published because everything can't be important or nothing important. And we had the mindset before the time everything was important, and then people were losing focus. So practice number 2 then, once you have that kind of system approach here, the idea was actually go and see how good we're actually doing. So here's the 2 cartoons where you see this work as plan versus work as done. So typically when you plan work out, you think about terms of a very linear process. Then if the engineer was so desirable to go down and watch it work, you find out that it's a 1.1 process. And the first question is going to be, what's different? The second question is going to be, does it really matter? Okay. Some things don't matter, some things do matter. But then, I cannot overemphasize how powerful a tool this is to have smart people go down and watch work in a very systematic way and see the differences. And then their eyes on body that. temperature control is step 5, and a hazard ratio is step 4 or 4A, then you don't get any kind of credit because your control came in too late in the process. So we never saw this before, but typically most people in the government, I think most of the area analysis, do it at 20,000 foot level. They say, yeah, you have hazards, yes, and you have controls, yes. But those controls aren't in place when you need them. They don't do any good. And so all these things that we were reading about the normal accident theory, we can write our own book on this stuff because we got very comfortable thinking that we had everything under control. And so as we started exploring this work is done, and we realized the fact that we don't have as much control as we do because procedures aren't followed as strictly as we like them to. We had a lot of work to go and work. This was a very lengthy process to go through to do that. So to help us effort out, we have this thing we call this Break the Chain, the BCC framework. This was a simple tool to help our people appreciate what we're trying to get done by doing the trivia analysis. So we're going to walk you through. And the other thing, by the way, is that we were very good at what I call prevention of individual accidents. We have the lowest total recordable rate almost any class of department. We have had for quite a few years. But you go back and read the literature on NASA, these people that matter, that don't quite count when it comes to senseless accidents. So our focus on our HRO process was to avoid the senseless accident. So we wanted to show people what we're talking about. The first thing is think about what the senseless accident to avoid happens to be. The second thing would be identify the hazards that if they receive the wrong energy input would create a bad day. And then you want to do two things. You want first to minimize those hazards and then protect them. Okay? And I'll talk about the rationale behind that. So then go through there and identify the threats. And so again, being very specific about if it's a human threat or human error, could that human error propagate energy to the hazard which results in a bad day? Do you have equipment, do you have tooling, or do you have facilities that were designed to prevent something from happening? But maybe because you didn't do your maintenance on it, false equipment, that would transmit energy to your hazard. You have other nature in terms of earthquakes and tornadoes or lightning that can transmit energy to it. So if your hazard happens to be explosives, you can see that if you take explosives and divide it in smaller quantities, if you have a bad day, you wouldn't have a really bad day. So all our facilities are designed as non-propagate facilities. So one goes off, the others do not go off. And we do that. But then the other thing was look at the protection against that, and to do that again, have to understand what the threats were. So the idea here was, as important as individual accidents were, we just couldn't afford these business accidents, mega accidents that would just rock the world. And so the focus of our program is on avoiding business accidents. It works for anything, but our focus is business accidents. So with this framework of how business accidents occur in our simple minds, let me show you the process we put together to make sure it didn't happen in Pantex. We've done a 6-step process. Step number 1 was to identify what the accident was to avoid. That sounds like an intuitive thing, but I said before, when you have people who've been doing hazardous work for many, many years and nothing ever goes wrong, what's the accident you want to avoid, they can't answer you because they lost track of it. So the idea here is if you don't think something will go wrong, you're always going to go wrong. So every day, step number 1 is head of the process, identify what's the worst thing can happen. Second step, identify the hazard that can cause it to occur, and then that hazard minimized. Step number 3, explicitly go through and identify the threats that each threat is different. So the human error threat, that's kind of the active error, that's the error that occurs the day of the event. You can see where we plug our human process in there. The idea was to recognize that humans are fallible, that they can order 3 to 5 errors per hour. What you need to non-building errors impacting the hazards, likewise with children facilities and Mother Nature. So what I'm trying to show here in the cartoon is by the arrow, is a number of opportunities that have a data curve, and those little boxes there are kind of barriers in place, the threat and the hazards, and prevent the hazards from getting energy, right? And so we show multiple barriers that apply to all, multiple and independent. We start to realize that we've got a picture here that shows that in most cases 4 barriers in this line. We have upwards of 6 to 8 barriers in each of our processes. And so with that being independent barriers, we should have no events of campus whatsoever. We were having events all over the place. So we started to realize that maybe these barriers were more independent. Maybe they weren't real, maybe they weren't really put in place. This first workers numbers were just maintained in play. So we're starting to realize the fact that, a lot of these barriers that we're taking credit for, it's really very coupled with maybe they weren't as robust as we thought they were. So we're starting to go on this whole process here to just kind of strip all this confidence in these barriers and make sure either the strong ones in place or recognize the fact that the only thing we have in play is a good one. Okay. So step 4 was that defenses. Step 5 was cultural liability. This is a pretty logical sequence to go through, and the idea was that they can work with people with logic. And people here at Pantex are very logical, very mechanical way people that are mechanical. And the idea was that they can explain this process in terms of how they think that perhaps they're buying into it and they can use this. And you can see if you break that chain between the threat and the hazard, there's no probability of how that does exactly occur first. And that was the whole mindset of this. And step 6 was when you blow through a barrier or a control, rather than waiting for the blow draw form, stop right there and go find out what's wrong with that control. A lot of times we found out that we may have had 4 controls, but they weren't in series, they were parallel. And you blow through one, you're on through. And so people didn't appreciate this. So this little cartoon is how people kind of walk through the process to make sure they understood. And by the way we tried to explain to people how hard it was, we would apply this little simple example on the 4 explorers back in time about the blowouts and rollovers of a vehicle. So I would ask the people that were taking this class, and we had an accident with a blowout of tires and a vehicle rollover is pretty high consequence again. And so I asked them what was the hazard at the time they were trying to protect, and the bottom line is it was the low pressure of the tires. Of course, tires and modified to the damning essentially on our yard, but what I tried to get people to understand was that, okay, then I had people having to go here, check their tire pressure before coming to work. And the answer was no, never. Nobody ever does that. So I asked them why not. They said, well, because even though it's a very consequential event, the probability of having it been very low. And so I said, okay, on this same analogy that what we do here again is nuclear work, high consequence, low probability, and you don't consider yourself much of personal safety or more than your family. Even check your hazards in the process of run on guards. And I said, why do you think the nuclear work is really different? Because they have never seen an explosion. They have never seen a nuclear explosion. And so people get kind of complacent pretty quickly because it's easy to tell people to be safe. It's hard when you put yourself in their shoes to really hold the line and be very vigilant about that. So this kind of shows people how hard this high consequence will probably really get hard to take. So we take that little cartoon there, and basically we kind of put the papers together here. And once people had a complete process, master process, we walk them down one step at a time. We ask them what they have to do, what to avoid, step by step through the process. Every process line, we make them identify what the threats were. The idea was if you don't identify the threats, you probably have wrong control or wrong barrier. Identify the barrier that was there, what people who bought burglar alarms for their house. And I asked them, what did you buy it for? And obviously, I could see the burglars. I said, was it professional burglars or was it amateur burglars? And then I asked them, how do you know it works? And most people know I know it works because my wife does it all. Well, you didn't buy the wife on your house. So, a professional burglar could just get through a burglar alarm system in a matter of half a minute. So the people, once they have it in play, are very comfortable and take very sound. So if your control of your barrier wasn't designed for the threat that you have a small sense of security, and we find out here is that people are just very comfortable and never went back to check. So the barriers would decay or they go away because of people barriers. We have to implement them in the first place, and we didn't maintain them. So a barrier doesn't get better good unless it's there. We have to know how significant it was, and this was my barrier in place. We have a question about, putting additional barriers in place. And you think about that, if you remove the threat or the hazard, you don't need a barrier. It's much easier to maintain. We have to look at the cost benefit analysis, and then finally, if you're going to replace an adjunct barrier, which is just a procedure, with another adjunct barrier, you're wasting your time because you need to go in the first place, you should not go in the second place. And so this process is help us go through our procedures and remove this false security we had and we're so good and have a great one for us to go. So the third one was the office corporate liability here, and I'm sure you guys are getting close to it too. I get the same buzzwords here with the Department of Energy Safety Culture, which is the wrong terminology used in the talking. So I would go through and ask people what it means to them, have discussed it, and then we can change it. And Rick has a pet peeve here because I give them a test. So here's my test I would give them. So we went through at least two very large safety culture systems that got very bad scores on both of them. And so I asked the folks, if you came to my group and you saw these kinds of culture issues, I got mistakes, I got corners, I think even that response that I'm giving up all procedure or work on it whenever I can. How would you characterize my culture, course responsible, that's just untolerable, or it's terrible, blah, blah, blah. And then I said, well, look at my work environment. Okay, every time I make a mistake, I get docked for it. I have more work that gets done in a similar period of time. It's true, we have so much other things that will not get done. Some people try to go to the kids play soccer when they go to college. I didn't quite get that. The procedure part here, we have basically had the formal process to take it out of the Congress because the procedure change here. So if people can't get anything out of work, they got to get done, they're not going to procedure because they can't get approved. And then I'm offering things like that because I can't get the job done. I get yelled at, people hate that kind of stuff. So I ask myself this question, what's the solution? And right now I would tell you the solution in DOE is focus on fixing the culture. I would tell them it's absolutely the wrong thing to do. It's the work environment. Culture is just a symptom. The work environment is a problem. And we're just going the wrong way. Everybody in DOE right now is going the wrong way. Everybody's focused on counseling people to improve their culture, and the work environment is a mess up of everything. So that's the wrong way to do that. So that's kind of the way I'm approaching it, and hopefully it'll go to traction. So this is the definition of safety culture at DOE. It's kind of organized this year. We kind of copied it from the Duker groups here, the organization value of behavior, modified leaders, modified members, do all that kind of good stuff. And so we bring in Shine here, and I took some liberty to Shine work. And so, again, I understand, we have to rocket scientists here with mechanics. Sean has a 3-level culture here on assumptions, so I classify that as what your boss really wants to have work to occur. We have a second level there, values and beliefs, which is what your boss says he or she wants. And then a highest level artifact behavior is what you use to survive. And so we have try to ask people, their culture look like this. Why do you think that what you survive is one culture we want? Well, it's because of survival thing. And everybody says, well, that's a dysfunctional culture. That's exactly right. And so that alignment process, and we're told not to use simple things like this, describe complicated issues like culture. But it really does help people internalize the challenges we have to manage. Okay? So we tell them the Ph.D. thing, Ph.D. program is designed to get alignment between what the boss really wants and what the boss says he or she wants. I could be working on it. And that just gets you started on this desirable issue. And if people start trusting that and buying into it, they will have to become a HRO. And moving boxes is so simple to do on a PowerPoint slide. That is almost impossible to do with your managers because, unless they want things to be done safely, they get held accountable to standards that they got to get things done for a period of time. So they're struggling all with how people respond and so on. So I wanted to use the same kind of mindset here to monitor my culture. And this is something that typically done on a technical perspective. It was done by Tony Abel. He came in here, they come in here and they ask them the work procedure, work is planned. They'll look at the policies, and they'll talk to senior managers. They'll either do interviews or maybe go out and watch work is done, how people really do work. And as soon as they see that gap between work is done and work is planned, it points out the little things we're going to talk about is pretty poignant that way. And our behaviors, how do we tend always along to that kind of assumption. So this process here, I'm doing a culture assessment. I want you to do the same thing we had before. You have a draft work plan versus work is done. Things like Pantex is supposed to plan their work for language and document safety analysis. That's a very important thing to understand and to minimize in other areas where it matters. Okay. The last thing is practice number 4, which is just basically how you run the whole process. Again, we took a tiered approach because we got a lot of programs in place. I would tell you for our nuclear processes at tier 0 startup, we will cram work as planned, even work is done so tight because we can't afford that mistake. And so, and that goes right to the kind of the mindset of nuclear safety and also HMO. But then I have people, how long does it take to drift between work is planned versus work is done? And I would contend before the day is over when that trip is already started. So this process of keeping work is planned, work is done, equal, is a very, very expensive and tedious process. And you can get another tier there as we go through this chain here. Again, different levels of learning for different cases and depending on what we have to do. I think that's all we got. We'll put out our 2 books. We want to have a book for our people to use. We publish this one here. Very simple book to lay out the process. And we also have a causal factors analysis process. And the idea there was, we didn't do such a stellar job. How to go back and learn the organization. Where do we fail as being a high-level organization? How to take it apart that way so we can learn from our particular events. I think that's it. That's it.
Wonderful, Rick. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick.
Go ahead, your chair. Question?
Rick, thank you very much for that. What I was curious about is we're talking about the whole culture or environment and, the focus on that. I was wondering, things like, well, I don't want to say enforcement, but what are the consequences for improper behavior or for not doing as should be done? Where does that come in your entire team?
We used to. Are you familiar with city executive work?
Not really.
Not really.
City executive, basically, we took the same mindset that most companies did workers fall. It's basically go punish your workers. Okay, so as we started to appreciate the fact that a lot of times workers are only doing what they have to do to survive the day because we have to go out of them. If something's got to be done a certain way, it's got to be done for research or so. Most people just want to get the job done to make their home happy. Now, a lot of them, even though they're told about the great task, if you've never been exposed to static during, you're not quite a believer here. So a lot of times people need some procedures not to be evil people, just to get the work done. Because again, keep in mind, this has been a very, very successful organization during the Cold War. They cracked out stuff here like you wouldn't believe. And the firm belief was if we didn't do our job, the country would be defeated. And so that mindset is still here. So we used to do that. We punished the workers, and then we had the thing here again and again. And so we're trying to teach the fact that the work environment sets up the worker's response. So if one worker is not quite following a procedure, that's probably one roach among many. The thing down to find out why the workers aren't following it forward and fix that problem, because that's where the problem is really kind of generating from. And as the employment assessment started to unveil themselves that we had some issues to say the least, well, we're just a smaller picture of the bigger environment we have. So this whole weapons complex environment is a very, very stressful, strenuous environment to work in, and I think we're just seeing that we're just part of the same problem. So we're learning as we go. We're finding a lot of times here that we set our workers up to failure. We expect too much and can't possibly get it done. We demand to be done anyway. They take action on hand. They're not one they have a mistake. And now we're trying to realize that they did it because of us. Maybe I'll take a step back and look at it.
When your plant manager visited Carlene a couple of years ago, he had a very enlightened concern that we weren't quite up with, where he indicated that in your culture and in your staff, you tended to have retired World War II military, you had older senior physicists who had worked ever since the Manhattan Project, and their attitude toward this military notion of reward and a lot of punishment, and their attitude toward following rules might not be a prevailing attitude in the generation that should be replacing them right now. And one of the answers they look for, which we certainly couldn't help them with, was what should they be doing to change with that shift in demographics, and I hate to use the word culture again, but in attitude today. And is that still an active concern?
Well, I would say the workforce is not as mature as it was back then, because a lot of them have retired. But again, the culture that was set up here wasn't, in my mind, generated by those people. It was generated by the bigger culture with the weapons complex and that responded to it. The challenge, I think now, most people recognize the fact that a lot of pressure focused on it is the formality of operations and those kind of things, much more ingrained than it ever has been before. But I still think that people read things differently. If you have a procedure and I have a procedure based on my background, my stress factors, I will read it differently. We would be using the same words. So realize the fact that these procedures, some reason show people's behavior and attitude toward those procedures. So that starts to that changed quite a bit. I would say the culture of Pantex for the last 10 to 12 years has changed dramatically. The challenge we're having now is that we're bringing a lot of new people on board. We have like 5 generations of people here, such that the culture is so much different, the way they act is so much different. And we're operating off the old mindset, procedures, formality, that kind of stuff. And newer people are more technology driven. And so we're just down trying to struggle with how to keep younger people engagement process is so formal without having all the paperwork and stuff like that. So we're starting to see new challenges now we had before.
Well, it's interesting to us that your supervisors recognize that, and they were attending to it before you were really into it. And I think we'd like to be kept up on how you manage it. Jennifer, did you have a question?
And during the conference, yes, I did actually. I think about the questions that I want to tell at a basic operating procedures for accelerated nuclear plant. And in the same vein of the questions that before, I remember I was literally just checking the punctuation when I kind of level. You were actually writing stuff. Because one of the challenges they had is that the operators were nuclear substation operators, reactor operators. And they would fall back onto features such as pump reactors and stuff like that, which wasn't necessarily programming resilience. Something that might be some of that same kind of culture, generational system still happens here. That was another issue they had to deal with. Did you run into that there?
So it's kind of funny because there's a lot of retired Navy people in Amarillo and how to drop of water around here. We told people we have never taken Pantex for dives, so we're not going to. Most of the next new Navy folks were brought in as mentors, as management to help formalize the process. The people who do the work have been here for many, many years in Amarillo, and most, not that many of them are, I guess, what I call big Navy kind of people here. So, no, I think the challenge here, or the challenge one time was we get this before without procedure. What do I need a procedure for? And so that was probably the first resistance. I think that's now subsided. I think now we're going through our kind of second iteration here. And I guess I would challenge almost any facility, nuclear or otherwise. If you really go down and look at how people really do work, and I guess keep in mind that if I was not comparing Pantex to a nuclear reactor, in my mind, is about 80-90% engineer control because the reactor will take care of itself if you just behave yourself and stuff like that. Here, I would say we're about 80% people-oriented procedure. We don't have very few engineer controls whatsoever. So it's all based on people's training, people's attitudes, willingness. And so, to me, it's a much harder thing to control when you're trying to get people to buy into it, follow procedures, particularly when they're problems that can't get fixed. And so, I think it's a different kind of picture here, but I don't get a sense that we're going back to the nuclear Navy days at all.
Yeah, I actually have two questions if I could sneak them in. One is, I'm very intrigued by this energy flow model you described. You mentioned that it was part of the history of Pantex. That became a way of looking at organizing safety, I guess, in the operation. And then you mentioned it later that there seems to be a way of connecting the physics to the management of risk. Could you elaborate a little more on this energy flow perspective and how comprehensive it actually is?
Oh, yeah. We have a process called nuclear explosive safety, and the whole desire is, or design has always been, even from the very first onset of nuclear weapons, has been to, minimize the unwanted energy into a weapon at a particular point in time. So, the basis there has been a long time ago. We something to kind of formalize it, not formalize it, put it into, I guess I'll call it a cartoon or mental model concept for people to understand why we ask them to do such kind of unusual things like follow procedure step by step, why you want to recognize the generic precursors to see themselves going in traffic and stop themselves at a time. Just get people to think about the framework on which we work, because the idea was if people understand why they're doing what they're doing. And I would contend people at Pantex know what to do. They know what to do, like you would believe. They may not appreciate the why behind a lot. And so if they're here 2 2 in the morning, they're going what to do, and they're taking short time, they could violate something or take a shortcut for that way, and they got it time, but you can understand why it's so important for. So when you put in context of why you're going step by step, why this control is in place, and every control is a piece of work. And so you got to tell people, or slow you down, for a really particular reason, this reason why. And we have found that it works pretty good because people do that kind of little bit of model there. Most of them are able to finish the whole model without me finishing, without being completely the middle line of work where that fits in. So that was the idea is how can we make this not a favorite day, make it logical so people understand it for logical people, and maybe if they understood it, they would buy into it. And then actually do it versus have to.
I guess I still don't get it. Is the energy you're talking about just in terms of the weapons energy, or when you use energy, you mean something about the task difficulty or how?
Okay, so here's a good example. So we have a lot of explosives here, so we have to handle explosives. So if I have somebody who's walking around with some explosives and fall, well, that's pretty exciting. So I've just now put in mechanical energy for explosives. And now a small amount of mechanical energy has resulted in a large mechanical energy release. Okay? Or if I have a fire in a facility that has explosives, all of a fire, which is a hazard in itself, ends up being a bigger hazard than my explosive store. So we go through a lot of effort, like I said before, to minimize any energy that can be imparted from weapons, whether it be electrical energy, or mechanical energy. The mechanical energy, you do it by tooling design. You design a tooling system, we don't miss anything hardly at all. The thermal energy, we have requirements that you can't take combustible material down to facilities. You got to take it back out again. But if we have a fire, it doesn't go to a big fire. In electrical, we've got electrical conducting floors, the discharge, any kind of static buildup of lighting or where it was, that weapon comes to electrical install. So this is all real hardcore electrical energy imparted to a hazard. And a hazard is explosive, it can be nuclear explosives and stuff like that.
So it's a way of organizing the safety analysis.
Absolutely.
That they all
everything's organized that way, so all the risk assessments are based on that. Everything we do to mitigate risk is based on what's the barrier between the hazard and the risk.
So I guess that's the second question, and that is the work as designed and the work as planned. I know a lot is organized, work as designed and work as done. Sorry, a lot is organized to make sure there's not a gap there. But can you speak more about how you detect errors of design in the work as planned?
Yeah, we actually have gone back, and now we have 3 different levels. We have versus imagine, which is a separate thing, and that kind of goes back to the basic physics requirements, or in our case, sometimes the regulatory requirements. Then so those are external to the drivers, so to speak. And we have versus plan, so we look for gaps between work as imagine versus plan. And we didn't capture a requirement, whether it be a physics requirement or regulatory requirement, we catch it there. Because the idea if you have the wrong procedure, what do you think could happen to that? And then we look at gaps in work as plan versus work as done. Because even if you have a good plan, and people don't follow like you have designed it, and you already know that you watch the procedure or watch the process being worked. Charles, maybe.
Join the conference.
We want to have appreciation for that. So we drive down from the highest level all the way down to the bottom level now.
John, you have a question? Yeah, I have a question. So this really looks great on paper or our plan, I guess. I love the cartoon. My concern is, so you have these barriers, everything's in place, and I think this is a great strategy for mitigation. But I see time in here, and you haven't really talked much about time. Everything seems to have these nice intervals. And I can't help but think that, and you were talking about generations. And I think I'm now teaching 5 generations of people. And time is very different for them. They handle things differently in the same specified amount of time. So here's my concern.
what if there's not enough time to do those well planned out procedures between the barriers? So you're coming up on a barrier and you don't have enough time, or maybe your perception is you don't have enough time, but you're still following the procedures, and then you run out of time and there's an incident and it breaks through the barrier and you're now into the next barrier. How do you deal with that? How do you understand? I think about Sully Sullenberger, you know, and in a split second he was a flyer, and maybe the guy in the right seat was a pilot. But in a split second he realized, I don't have enough time to follow procedure. So he passed that to his co-pilot, and then he went to Sully Sullenberger's emergency procedure. How do you factor time into this?
Well, two things. The first thing is when we have high hazard operations, everything is guided and controlled by procedure. So we can't get authorization to work until the procedure we have for process has been published. They go through, I would say, 3 or 4 different reviews by different teams to see people do the work. They check to make sure there's no energy flow, all that kind of stuff. So when we're talking about doing normal work in hazard operations, everything is procedure driven, and if you can't operate except for procedure, you just stop. And that's one thing nice about our process compared to like a nuclear reactor. If you stop and no energy flows, you're kind of in a stable mode. Nothing's going to happen. And so we encourage people, actually demand that people from those kind of processes, as soon as you catch a problem, we just stop. And we'll go back and rewrite the procedure or whatever we got to get done. So that's kind of how we plan work, how we do work in high hazard areas. Pretty well controlled, I would say. Now, what you mentioned before is what happens when things go wrong. That's kind of a different mindset there, because then you're reacting to something that was maybe not controlled or where it was. So when we do those things here, you can't write procedures that kind of stuff because you never know what could go wrong. And so they have a group over there who does their kind of emergency response kinds of stuff. But I would contend, you know, they probably, it's just a hard thing to practice because you don't know what you're going to have until it's too late.
Let me make a comment. This is very interesting, very good. Let me tell you what I worry about. Is that coming out of engineering myself, and more now in psychology, people are not all that logical. They may kid themselves and pretend, but unless I know the stress points on their life, but the anxieties they face, that carries over to work. That's the first comment. But let me tell you what really disturbs me is that if I were a disclaimable employee who really had knowledge of the system and I wanted to engage in sabotage, I would want to know how that's possible. Now, years ago, I came across an organization whose name I won't mention. And I asked them what they were doing about product tampering. People here have heard the story before. And they said they had an internal assassin team, because no one knew more about their products than anybody else. And how could an assassin get in there, steal products, do the most damage, get out, and remain undetected for as long? So, I mean, I follow what you say about barriers, and it makes sense, but it's not just unpredictability. There is an aspect of human behavior more than we would like to know, particularly the more the systems engage in physical engineering, quote, logical work, to look at the unsavory, unconscious aspects of human beings. So, if I were to do a flow of the organization, I would want to do a fear and anxiety flow and stress flow. I don't mean stress necessarily in the work, in the engineering sense, but stress in a psychosocial, even anthropological flow. And that to me is a deeper level, because all the things you outline make a lot of sense for us. I mean, that's really adds to, to getting the HRO realized, not just in theory or on paper. But it's these deeper things that always worry me because more often than not, I don't see systems giving any conscious attention to these kind of factors. In fact, I'm going on to what I'm saying. The more that systems are engineering, physics driven, the less sensitive they are to these deeper human factors and issues. And that really, really worries me about HR organizations that are really dealing with dangerous products and processes.
Yeah, now keep in mind, the process that I described is the one where people are trying to do the right thing, okay? What you mentioned, and you probably would get, what you mentioned is a super sensitive area here at Pantex. So most of us aren't even privy to stuff like that. And so it's a compartmentalized thing that's still heavily compartmentalized, but I can't even tell you what they use, what they do, and stuff like that. I have no idea what's going on.
Well, let me just make a comment. That's a very interesting point, because that goes precisely my point. I understand the confidentiality. I mean, I've had security clearances early in my life. But the point is, these things are inseparable. Talk about interdependency. The most critical stuff, those, underneath the surface or, underneath the iceberg, is precisely the stuff that comes in wreaks havoc with all of these logical procedures. So I understand they have safety and security, I mean, of course, given the material and the hazards that we have. But there has to be some process that brings these things together. If not, the system is fragile for all these unknown things. And that's the thing, really, I mean, I gave up a long time ago believing, quote, that systems are logical no matter how well they're defined. That's not to take away from really an excellent presentation and what you're doing. In fact, if anything, it's just to carry it to the next step further.
No, I don't disagree with you. It's just the fact that the way Department of Energy is organized and stuff like that, if you don't have access to that or need to know, then you're not even invited to participate. So, all I can do is when I interact with people who do that kind of work, is try to educate them on what is happening here, and I don't know how to go beyond that.
Well, one last point is very critical, because, looking at the system, which this whole thing is about, therefore, the systems organization of DOE, and it impacts dramatically your safety culture and all other plants that are working in this kind of stuff. And, and that's really critical, because we have opened it up to the systems level. And the systems level is more than your internal system. It's really the external surrounding administrative bureaucratic systems. And you're right, how to break that open, that just raises, the ante up even more.
Before Rick runs off, can those of you who haven't had a chance to ask questions, or we can continue on this?
Somebody had a question.
Go ahead. Those who are online, any questions, Rick, before we go on?
So, Patty, why don't you go first, and then Cookie, you can follow up with your question.
Patty, if you're talking, we can't hear you.
Okay.
Okay. Cookie?
All right. My question was, I think, pretty simple. In the process of doing your barrier analysis, did you guys come across barriers that did not prevent against any major threat? So I understand your process, which is first identifying major threats after, you kind of identify kind of what big things can go wrong. And if so, what did you do about that? Did you remove those programs, those barriers as being, unnecessary? Were they left in place?
Yeah, the deal was, if you're not familiar with how the government or the DOE works, every time there seems to be an issue, mistake, or error where it was, we are encouraged, we have encouraged in the past to go back and put a new control in place, revise the procedure. So you get, after 40 years, we have so many controls, it's absolutely unbelievable. So, yeah, when we go through these processes here and identify something that doesn't add a whole lot of value as far as stopping a particular event, we have to encourage people to take those controls out and streamline a particular process because you can only do so much work. And so that's one of the things we've been trying to do here. The problem is a lot of those so-called controlled or pet peeves of the government folks and getting them to agree that, hey, this was the big this 25 years ago. It doesn't have a whole lot of value now. It's something we're starting to start with now, but it's going to be a long process to go through.
Okay, thank you.
Patty, can you hear? Or
She can probably hear. Why don't you read and everybody see her?
Patty, we can see what you're typing.
Can Dr. Hartley see it?
I can't see anything.
Okay, so we let you read it.
Okay. Roden, first, Sidney Becker is one of my heroes. His work is so relevant to the healthcare environment. Edgar Schein mentored a bit of my work during IHI fellowship. He too is a hero. In today's presentation, Dr. Hartley's presentation brought their work together in a manner that, in my humble opinion, health systems leaders could bring into their environment, e.g. identifying variation in the gap between work is planned and work is done. As you may know, healthcare is looking to HRO models and striving to become known as a high reliability environment. There are those who believe it will never be possible for healthcare and health systems to become HROs. Has Dr. Hartley worked with the health system? Does he have any thoughts, suggestions about healthcare becoming HRO?
We have worked with them briefly. I guess our challenge is, and you probably get, we're kind of focused on Pantex. When we made our material available and that kind of stuff. So I would say, if you like to look our team there, you get it. Again, we have a whole section on culture and stuff like that. And people I talk to respond pretty well to the, I guess, the mental model stuff and stuff like that. So yeah, those are definitely available, and if I can help you out with that, I'm glad to do that.
Hi there, Rick.
Hi, Ronnie.
Nice to see you.
You too.
I have a question about the culture assessment. I was with Sonia last year in Europe, and she mentioned that it didn't turn you up as an HRO. And we didn't have a chance to talk about it. It was the week her husband died, and that was a good week. We didn't have a chance to talk about it, but I wonder if overall what you think about what you're doing and that assessment, those two assessments of what you're doing. Did she have a wrong instrument? Were you doing the wrong stuff? What's going on here? Why don't we get them in?
No, because we put our history here. So before Sonia had a chance to come in here, we started our culture assessment. And so we started it actually two or three years before. And because we're not culture experts, we had tech come in and help us out and stuff. So our purpose of our culture assessment that we were doing by ourselves, we actually used our HRO criteria to see where we were at with regards to embracing the HRO concept. We knew we were far away. People asked me, Rick, is Pantex an HRO? I refused to talk to them about it. I said, no. Only time will tell. So we had the same results she had. We couldn't get the punchline fast enough because she came out pretty quick. And so that's been a struggle for our senior managers to deal with. I think DOE has opened a Pandora's box because after she finished here, she went to 3 or 4 other groups, DOE kind of groups, and they made us look pretty good. So, we're just a product of our environment. So we never misled ourselves where we're at the HRO journey. We knew we had a long way to go. That we know we kind of make people aware of it, but that
Rick, do you have time for a couple more questions?
Sure.
Todd, did you want?
Yeah, because this is a good segue to my question. I earlier talked about the relationship with upper management, and you noted just in passing the part of your environment includes lots of regulation. Could you talk a little bit about the requirements or the conditions you would think need to be in upper management and in the regulatory world for the kinds of evolution you're trying to produce at the work level?
Yeah, I thought really long and hard because I would contend, and I'll talk to other people who get kind of the HRO firewall, a brick wall, so to speak. This whole concept of selling HRO to a group of people who are convinced that they're doing the right thing is almost impossible. This is why things are working. They don't have time to do any extra discipline required. And so I find it a very difficult sales pitch to make. If it wasn't for a couple of our government counterparts across the street now in Tennessee, who absolutely are probably more enamored by the concept of higher liability systems thinking than any contractor ever was, this project would have gone 4 years ago. So they're the ones who see the value of the business we have and is driving our senior managers towards it. But again, it's a pretty interesting environment that they work in because our senior managers are rewarded for different things, and this is not necessarily one of them. Or if it's not rewarded, it gets dropped. We're going to take it probably typical of some organizations. So I can sit down there and use Cotter's 8 or 12 steps about transform organizations to right up to the nose of why the HO stuff is not going to work in regards to the current environment. And that was just to try to share my frustration. I just went through Cotter's steps of what requires transform organizations and said this is why this didn't work very well at our place, so and kind of help delineate them. But I would contend a lot of cases the senior managers are just like us, trying to survive every day. And so if this is not on the radar screen today, and these are a long-term investment, it's hard to keep it going. It's hard to get their interest to keep it going that way.
Did you have a follow-up question, Todd, on that?
A whole lot that they're always well-planned.
Anyone else here? Oh.
Yeah, I have kind of a pedestrian question as usual about operational aspects of your hazards and threats slide, which shows the systemic obstacles you put in to various foreseen and unforeseen threats. And I know a little bit about how you manage the hands-on assembly and disassembly tasks. Are the workers who are performing the procedures responsible for monitoring and maintaining the barriers to hazards, or are the barriers and interventions and monitoring them in the hands of third parties?
No, actually, a decision was made some time ago that people who do work will never see the controls. They're embedded in procedures. And some people, that's not true. But they didn't want them inside of one control or another control. So the controls are put in place by a third party, an engineering group, and a monitor, not just by engineering, but other groups outside of like quality and stuff like that. And so we don't tell our workers, the nuclear workers, we don't tell them explicitly what the controls are because we don't want them inside any step beyond another step, because every step is critical. That's the mindset and coach here and procedure requirements we have in place.
Bingo, thank you. Since you know Rick's work for that, you have the last question.
I wasn't going to ask you a question, but I was going to ask you, Rick, if you knew that Sully had a copy of one of Deckard's books in the cockpit when he landed the plane. And since the book was lost, the mayor of New York gave another copy to him when he congratulated him for a job well done. So I want to talk to both you and Sonia sometime, but we'll do that offline. I haven't seen it in so long.
Yeah.
Well, Unless people have urgent time follow-up, I'd like to thank you for the last hour and a half. This has been very, very interesting.
Yeah, I may urge you guys, the one thing that I talked to Carlene about that I think is very important, you know, there's a lot of people out there who are trying to do this Ph.D. stuff that don't have, they call it the academic backing or the theoretical backing, which is very important, by the way. But I also contend that the practical application there and the frustrations and the challenges faced by people are important feedback for you guys, because I'm trying to appreciate the fact that as good as the theory is, until you try to do it with 3,000 people, a very high pressure job and very demanding and nothing to get done, there is a new facet to this hierarchy that I think people have quite explored. If we really want to make this thing work, there's a lot of work to do yet. And so if we can try to get a dialogue going on, I think the exchange would be beneficial for both parties.
That all happens to be on my court. I will put together a survey and get out to all of you folks and find out what it is you really want and need, and I haven't done that. And Saturday I'm going to Singapore, and so it's not going to get done until I get back.
Well, with that, thank you very much, and we'll sign off.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Very good.
Let's come.
Can I ask a question? If I heard him right. Yes. If I had to take up what he said, if he wouldn't say, with all this regulation, you know, the problem that he was talking about, he would be one of the first I would